The Doctor Who Alhambra Podcast. Real Doctor Who fans with real Doctor Who opinions.
Hello and welcome to the Doctor Who Alhambra Podcast, a podcast dedicated to discussing and reviewing all things Doctor Who, Big Finish, science fiction, and any other thing that tickles our fancy. I am your host, Brett. This is episode 330 of the Doctor Who Alhambra Podcast, and this is going to be a very exciting episode because besides some of the things that I mentioned that we are not going to be doing in this podcast is going to be focusing on discussing the possibilities of animating the lost Doctor Who episodes. And then I'm going to be discussing and reviewing my thoughts on the colorization of the classic Doctor Who story, The Daleks. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. It is going to be a fun, possibly bumpy ride. So, that being said, I want to first bring up covering the animating the lost Doctor Who stories. Now, I have not had any real interest in picking up the Celestial Toymaker Blu-ray because I feel as though like the animation looks like if you watched it back in the day or whatnot, I feel as though it's very Jimmy Neutron-y. And for this to be done in 2023 or so, I find the animation is just not my cup of tea. Now, I am on a missing Doctor Who episode discussion board, and this was brought up a little while ago. And it's one of those things that I think that people have their opinions either positive or negative, or there are some neutral, because sometimes just having Doctor Who in your life is what makes everything just so much better. So there was a discussion revolving around the release of the Celestial Toymaker on Blu-ray, and it was brought up and it says it is quite definitely not going to be for everyone, but this is a fantastic take, meaning the Jimmy Neutron centric, similarly animation style of Doctor Who. Now, as somebody who massively criticized the first Power of the Daleks animation, and also I one of these days I will get to, I can't believe that podcast was lost, the animation of The Web of Fear. Yes, a thing that was gifted to me by Liam Legion and Humphrey probably about 2-ish years ago. Had it all review all set in stone, had the cuts, had everything ready to go, and lo and behold, my computer just decided it no longer wanted to work forever. And I lost everything. Probably should have everything backed up on the Dropbox or something like that. But you know what? Who would have thought that my computer just decided it desired no longer to work? I asked it every single day, would you like to work? And it seemed to, do a pretty good job most of the time. But anyway, back to the original discussion of the animation style of the Celestial Toymaker. And I want to, and there's a reason for this, because I'm going to transition to another animation discussion that I think could have legs. And I'll get to that in a little bit. So there's a tease for a little later on in the podcast. So some people in this group said, I'm tempted to say it looks dreadful just to get an angry face from somebody in the group. Mine still has not yet arrived. So, people goading each other. Again, love the whole, back and forth between everybody and whatnot. A little while later, the person who said this, reviewed it about a couple days later, said, it looks like smiley face poop emoji, regarding the animation. And it says Doctor Who being for 5 years old is bad. So he basically says that this animation style looks like 5 years old, hence my Jimmy Neutron very compare and contrast to what it looked like. This looks like, computer animation at the early 2000s. And I don't like it. I think, I've heard, and there is some people that basically say, this is a creative solution and it makes the story far more engaging. And they think that, if you don't like it, the retcons or whatever are marvelous too. So you could look those ones up on YouTube. And then, some people were saying, two thoughts on the animation. One, a perfect recreation of 60s era and the episodes as broadcast. The other is to say the animation affords the episode production values the original writers would have wished, but also denied. It says, I would be in favor of, never mind, I'm just going to skip that. A lot of people say 9 out of 10, liked it, feel the otherworldly animation as discussed. I guess that's one way to look at it. I think it looks clunky. And yeah, I watched Jimmy Neutron back in the day. And, whenever I see that kind of animation, that's why I have not been able to watch the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, is because the animation just looks clunky. And if I wanted to see an animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, I would expect it to be very similar to those animation styles back when in the late 80s, early 90s for the cartoon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That would be what I would expect. Are we going to get that? No, I don't think we ever will get that. Then yeah, you could also say, those animations, there was some clunkiness about it. But however, we now have modern technology that is associated with everything now, which could make things a more improvement. And here's the interesting thing about the whole animating of these episodes and or colorizing some of these episodes is now with the ability of AI. I think that this gives a future possibility to making the animation process a tad bit easier. Now, will it be as kind of ugly as the first rendition of Power of the Daleks? Hopefully not. Hopefully they take their time. There's no rush. They want to get it right, not get it done so that they could buy it, or so people could buy it. Get it done right once. And, I say that, and I own 2 different copies of Power of the Daleks, the disaster copy and the actual good quality one. So, but I think now because of, and here is the one thing that I think the BBC and other things, places and institutions need to take a look at is podcasters and especially YouTubers that do reviews, because I think, you could call it toxic, you could call it whatever, but I feel as though you could, YouTubers can make or break a series. If you don't like something, but you're kind of curious about how it's going to play out, well, you don't have to actually watch the episode and or movie, because YouTubers will break it down and give you some of the, the video from the said movie or TV series. So you can still watch it, but you're not giving the corporation your dollar or your view or your, viewing hour or minute, I guess you could say. So I feel as though I think the BBC making quality restorations and also animations would be in their best interest, because yeah, they could do a Power of the Daleks, but I'll tell you, for me personally, I think I would sit it out until I got a, heard about a reviewer. And now also me being in the States, some of these Blu-rays that, I was dropping, $45, $55 for, if you wait 2 years and there will be a sale. I picked up the First Doctor season 2 sale for $20 about a year ago, where it was originally about like $49. So now I only have to wait out, and I don't need it, because in the UK, I know that they make these Blu-rays limited editions, but they don't in America. Meaning that all I have to do is just wait out certain things. They're not going to get sold out. Back in the day with the DVDs, they had limited number of releases of some of the kind of the latter DVD stuff, but more of the, stories that are much more enjoyable. Terror of the Zygons. I bought mine the instant it came out. I was in Barnes & Noble, and they had a clearance on a whole bunch of DVDs. And I knew that that one was well sought after, especially as also the Genesis of the Daleks. Picked them up for probably about $17 each. Put them on Amazon when you could sell things on Amazon without having to create an account and give Amazon monthly fees. And sold them for 3 times as much as I bought them for. And that's only because, back in the day, the latter, as we were getting closer to Blu-rays, the latter DVD releases were harder to find. And now, I go to, a thrift store and I see them all over the place. And, I can now wait out and not have to worry. And so just to get back to the original point is, yeah, BBC should be animating some of these things, but they need to make sure that it's quality. I will, at one point in time, I will own Doctor Who and the Celestial Toymaker. I will not pay full price. I will wait this sucker out for either Amazon or to find it at a thrift store. And I will pay, a fourth of what it actually would have cost me buying it brand new. So, and you can, you look at the reviews, you look at people's comments, and, it's not for everybody. But then you have like the whole, it's not the greatest animation, but it kind of works for the story. No, do you know what works for the story is animation, not Jimmy Neutron animation. And also, just to, end this animation, this portion of the animation discussion, I think that's where the DC animated universe is really struggling. In the 2010s, all the way up to about, I want to say 2018, 19 or so, their animation for their movies was second to none. Now it's almost like that they're using, flash animation. Like it is, I've been watching the Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1 on HBO Max, and I haven't been able to get through it just because the animation is just so low quality. And it's almost like people are just, either they don't want to invest the time. And if they're not going to invest the time, I own all of the early animation stuff from the DC animated universe. I have not bought an animation since, I bought the DVD, Death in the Family, but I've not bought one since The Long Halloween. I'm either going to wait them out for Max and watch them free that way, or I just won't watch them at all because I want quality. Don't give me quantity, give me quality. All right. So that is that. So the main reason why I want to talk about animation is, and there is something that I'm very excited for. I might have to pick up a Doctor Who magazine coming up real shortly. And that is Doctor Who magazine on Twitter is conducting a tournament. And this tournament is Doctor Who Missing Episodes Knockout Tournament. A tournament to find out which one you would prefer to be animated and or colorized. And, they started off with massive amounts of quadrants and stuff like that. Way back early on, they had, for example, June 17th, they had a tournament round 1, match 19. So, they have a whole bunch of these in 4 quadrant things moving on. I don't know the amount of time that they gave everybody, but for example, this one, Macroterra episode 1, Galaxy 4 episode 2, The Crusade episode 2, and The Abominable Snowman episode 3. Isn't Abominable Snowman's... What? Oh, sorry. Randomly found. Some of them are randomly found. Some of them are animated. But anyway, and so they were discussing some of these because say, yeah, some of those are whatever. But it's really quite interesting because currently the one that is like in third place is The Power of Daleks episode 1 and Evil of the Daleks episode 7. And with 700 or 912 votes currently, as the poll is still active, Power of the Daleks 1 is in first place. And then, the final one, the one poll to rule them all, is the 10th Planet episode 4 and Daleks Master Plan episode 12. And episode 12 is The Destruction of Time, which would be fantastic to, see Sarah Kingdom get vaporized out of existence the way it was intended, not done through either animation style or, what have you. I think that's kind of an interesting poll. I'm curious why Doctor Who Magazine is doing this poll. I know that sometimes they do polls just to have fun with the crowd. But the other question is do they know something that we don't know? Have they found something? Has, the people that are looking for the missing episodes of Doctor Who, have they found one? And they're going to really announce, this is the winner of the poll. Guess what? This is found. That would be kind of a really fun surprise. Or this is the winner of the poll. This is what we are choosing to animate. And the reason why I bring animation into it, because as I'm scrolling through it, I think my brain just read animation, and it is just, missing episodes found. But the main reason why I bring that up is there is a couple of YouTube channels that do polls for Marvel Comics, and they do, it's just fans. Yet, are they professional YouTubers? Yeah, they are. Do they have an in with Marvel Comics? Yes, they do. However, what they do is they find, runs, epic collections or omnibuses of particular characters, and they kind of create their own mapping or their own what they would do or whatnot, and they just do a poll. And then these people who make these polls, they submit the results to Marvel. And currently, some of the ones that I had voted for are going to be coming out in omnibus or epic collections in 2025. So you can't say that this poll is done they're not getting any coercion from Marvel to do it. This guy did this poll before he was, associated or helped or had an in at Marvel. It's just he has a louder voice. They're polling the fans to see what they would willingly pay for. And then those are the ones that are either getting reprinted. For example, I will give a shout out to one that I am very excited to pre-order, and that is the Star Wars, The Old Republic Omnibus Volume 1. I've never been that compelled. I was reading it, the first epic on Comixology. I've never been that compelled to want to read a Star Wars comic more my entire life until after I read the first comic in that epic collection. And then the instant I read the next one and the next comic in that for volume 1 of epic collections, I was just like, I need to own them all. I need to read all of them because that story is fantastic. And because of the poll, because that was one of the more higher ones on the omnibus poll, it is going to be reprinted and released in February of 2025. So again, these polls that are being done on Twitter, I know Twitter, not a great place. All social media is not a great place. You could say, I'm not seeing anybody. Well, how many people are you following? Are you following the same people? Like maybe the algorithm is different. Maybe it is tailored to you a certain way. Like the Dr. Alhambra Podcast Twitter account has been existent since 2013. And it is completely different from when I created the one that I was using to mock Liam And the one that I was using to mock Liam, it did not know me, and it just was irking me with all the things that it was showing me. So I eventually just deleted that one, and I just used this one as my show and Doctor Who connection. So yeah, take that as you will, but I would recommend, if you do have the time, if you'd like to, create an account, just stalk every so often Doctor Who Magazine, DMW tweets, and when they do a poll, participate in the poll, because who knows what might come from it. Maybe nothing, maybe a fun time, maybe something that you could talk to with friends and family members of Doctor Who, or maybe it might lead into the next animated Doctor Who story, missing story. I don't know. Just speculation. But I will tell you, if we could have the Daleks Master Plan animated, especially in the style of the DC animated universe from the 2010s-ish era, if they were able to do that, oh, maybe. That sucker would be worth, like, I'd drop at least 80 on that sucker. Just telling you right now. That would be fantastic, because it would be quality and it would be it's just beautiful. All right. So that being said, that is all about the animating classic Doctor Who stories. So now I'm going to move on to the colorization of the Daleks. And so they took the 7 original 25-minute episodes and they had a complete makeover, having dazzling colorization weaved into a 75-minute blockbuster to appeal to today's modern audience. With a brand new sound, a brand new score created by Mark Ayres, the Daleks has been gloriously updated, whilst ensuing the original classic story remains. So anyway, that is kind of like, FYI. This is, they had RTD in on this. They had Phil Collinson helping, obviously Mark Ayres. And, they even got David Graham, one of the Dalek voices, who is now like 98. He redid some of the Dalek voices for this. They got Nick Briggs to revoice some of the Dalek stuff. And you could say, how dare you modify the original? I think there's some positives and negatives to take from the colorization. First off, the colorization, and one of the things I do like, because I did not do this in the Macroterra animated thing, and they did not do this on a couple of the other, I want to say the faceless ones? I'm not sure if the faceless ones. I can't remember what else. But it really bothered me that when they animated some of them, I think also Power of the Daleks, they animated the center console as being green. And anybody who knows anything about the 60s Doctor Who knows it was only green so that it would look more gray and white in black and white. It's not meant to be green. It was seen as green during the Third Doctor era, when he had the console before they, redid some of it. I understand. But you could also just say that, fans can come up with theories. We had the whole Brain of Morbius theory that fans were very content with, except for one person, and he decided to ruin the show because of that. It is perfectly fine for the center console to be white and gray. I'm so glad that they actually made it white and gray, even though some of the other animations had it as green. I think that's a positive. I think another positive is the story did move along. And I liked some of the aspects of what they would do is they would take certain elements of the story and they would take the lines, by either, William Russell, Jacqueline Hill, William Hartnell, Carolyn Ford, and they would use them as voiceovers as you were seeing a part of, instead of them being in a room together just talking this and that, they were using them as voiceovers, and you were seeing the landscape of Skaro, you were seeing the forests, you were seeing the Daleks and their central command. So I really appreciated how they used some of these lines that were kind of like wooden, not wooden, because it wasn't wooden acting, but just kind of very, I don't know how you would describe it, but it just, just storytelling being told in a 1960s style. And then they jazz it up to, like it said, to reach a modern audience. That being said, so that is one of the positive aspects of the colorization of the Daleks, is those two aspects right there. I did appreciate seeing the sets. I will say I feel as though the sets were, as it was colorized, they looked more clunky and not well put together. And you could say, well, they weren't. But I mean, if you're going to go over all through, I didn't feel as though the sets were as clunky as they were in black and white. They did add some additional Dalek scenes using computer animation and putting Daleks in certain places. I feel as though there's one point where there was a Dalek command scene where there was Daleks that had, basically, what are they? Pictures of them, cardboard cutouts of Daleks. And they were able to use some of the 3D technology, and you could tell that they were trying to make it look three-dimensional, but also at the same time you could tell that because of where the alcoves were, because of where the curves or the corners of the Dalek command were, you could tell that they tried to imprint a 3D model in the place of a cardboard cutout. Does it ruin the story? No. Is it distracting? Kind of. Yeah. The thing that I found the most distracting of the story, and I didn't really appreciate this, is they cut out chunks of the story, and if you were paying very close attention, and you kind of knew the Daleks, the 7-part, 25-minute per episode story, you'd realize they missed a huge important moment. One of the most important moments, and maybe I missed it. I don't think I did. But Susan being forced to write a letter to the Thals. They did not insinuate it. I don't feel as though they even talked about that. The Thals received a letter and they were talking about it, and it was written by Susan. And for some reason, as I was watching that, I go, but she never did that. They never showed you that she did that. She was, as they were reading it, they were showing her in prison in the city of the Daleks after, retrieving some of the medicine. And it just didn't make the story go along well. They would do flashback scenes but they would be talking about a situation that happened, and they would do flashback scenes. Sometimes I felt as though it was done well. Other times, there was one scene that they were getting ready to attack the Dalek City, I believe episode 6, episode 7 of the 25-minute episodes from the 60s. And I felt as though the scene was giving a breakdown of, this is what we're going to do, this is what it's going to look like. Because they'd done so many flashback scenes and they'd set some stuff up that when they actually went to do it, I didn't see it as a legitimate scene. I saw it as this is what it's going to look like. And I sat and I had to step back. I'm like, well, wait, why would they do that? And they didn't have footage of that from the original story. This isn't a, setup of, well, so step one, we're going to go here. We're going to do this here. But that's how it was laid out. It was laid out visually to sometimes to have a good flashback scene as a character was recounting something. But then near the very end, you'd think that was like, a dream sequence of the possible breaking into the city. But it wasn't a dream sequence. It was the actual legitimate breaking into the city. And I found that very, very distracting. As I go to the timescales, some people really, really liked it. They feel as though the sharpness, though, of the editing should be dialed down and make it less sharp than it actually was. And I definitely agree. Oh, that being said, the sound and incidental music and tone that they did, I felt as though the incidental music really did add a additional layer. I know that it was really hard to take some of the 1960s incidental music and use and try to hide that. And every so often you could hear the new incidental music, cut into the original 1960s music. And I found that was kind of, a tad bit clunky. But, they weren't doing it to be clunky. They were doing it to increase attention. They were doing it to appeal to today's audience instead of, a series that not that many people enjoy. And I appreciate this because just going back to comic books right now, DC is working on trying to have their Epic collection line similar to what Marvel has done. Marvel did that, I believe, starting in 2014. You're releasing a couple of epics, from, this comic book to this comic book, Iron Man, this Iron Man 217 all the way to Iron Man 233 or something like that. So it collects a chunk of Iron Man and they will imprint or they will add in stories around that era to make the story make sense. So it might include some elements from Thor 17 or, the Avengers 91. And so I like that. And so that's what Marvel has done. DC is doing it. My only disagreement for what DC is doing is they're trying to pull all audiences in. And I think that's a really smart move, is you want all audiences. You would like as many people to pick up these things as possible. And what they're doing is they are doing a Catwoman book that I'm all in on. Some of her first appearances from some one-shots, some appearances where she's in the Batman title, but even though it's the Batman story, it is basically a her story. I'm very interested in that. They're doing a Wonder Woman line. I do have the omnibus for it. I'm not sure I want to pick it up. The only difference is again, kind of like what they're doing with the Epic collections. They're, throwing this story in to make the story kind of like a little bit more continuous. So they're doing modern stuff. They're doing the Justice League of America from this late 70s, early 80s, which I like, and I definitely picked that up. They're doing the Flash from the Silver Age, so from the 60s era. But the ones that I'm really having a struggle with wanting to actually own is they are wanting to do, having a DC, I can't remember what it's called, but they want to do a Superman one, taking Action Comics 1 to 27 and Superman 1 through 5 from the 1930s era. And those are very different comic feels. And I feel as though the audience that would be into that is slowly dying away. It's not something that should be ignored and forgotten completely, but I feel as though that those kind of stories are harder for modern audiences to read. The art isn't as high quality as it is now, or in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I think if you really want to get a crowd and back it, what you need to do is have some of the Silver Age, Golden Age, and some of the Modern Age, and keep on piping those out, and maybe every so often throw a Golden Age thing in there. But I feel as though DC constantly wants everybody to read everything from the very beginning. Batman from the beginning, Wonder Woman from the beginning, Superman from the beginning. And I think that that is a big mistake, because unless you're really invested in that kind of storytelling. For me personally, I think Marvel Silver Age is really good, can be wordy. DC Silver Age is still too wordy. DC comes into its own in Bronze Age. And so I would probably say like that's what they need to focus on. With Doctor Who, with this, they need to focus on what would people like. And I think that this colorization, this different, cutting this, cutting that, colorizing it might be helpful. But maybe what you need to do is just focus in on animating the lost episodes. Maybe you even start getting into animating not lost episodes. Jazz them up a bit. Have two different versions of it. If you really are wanting to get people in on certain things, make the background a tad bit more interesting. You will have people criticizing it, similarly to George Lucas's restoration of Star Wars episodes 4, 5, and 6 when he did that in the late 90s. A lot of people were super excited about it, but then you're adding this that wasn't originally there. You're going to irk some fans, and of course, you'll have me, who has owned all the original, as seen in the theatrical releases in the 70s and 80s, like those copies, as well as the modern day ones. But the ones I like are the original ones, because that is what was seen from my eyes. But again, devil's advocate, you have the people that really like the prequel trilogy, and they have no problem with the extras from the Star Wars. So I think Doctor Who needs to find what their focus is going to be on and go do it. I don't think they're ever going to get a huge modern audience from the classic era unless they take Big Finish actors, they rewrite the script, and then they animate all of that, jazzing it up with, David Bradley, people who look like or sound like people, but not look like people, use the original scripts and animate it in such a way where it makes sense. There's not things missing, and you don't have to fight over the classic incidental music. I think that is probably where the BBC needs to go if they really want a modern audience. I don't see this Doctor Who and the Daleks, besides it being a 60th anniversary release, I don't see that being a successful thing to do in the near future. I think they need to focus on the fans that they have now, animate, Daleks Master Plan, Marco Polo, a couple of others. And that was one of my, I will say, that was, just aside, that was one of my favorite parts about the end of the colorization of the Daleks, where as the Doctor was talking about his future adventures, they cut from scene to scene to scene to scene and colorized so many stories. I got to see a red Dalek from Dalek Master Plan. I got to see this colorized. I got to see the Web Planet part of it colorized. I thought that was a really cool idea and something that would get people to be really excited for. And then obviously in doing so, if they decided to do this or whatever, they added a lot of updated CGI stuff. They had a little bit more of seeing the Daleks from inside the Dalek suit and their perspective, similarly to what they did also on Power of the Daleks. I think that didn't take anything away. I think it was really, really good. What was it? There is there is a commentary that I wanted to look at on the timescales. So somebody said, the colorization itself looks really good. Everything looks correct, accurate, and believable. It manages to recapture the classic 60s spirit while also delivering a visually worthy remaster. However, beyond that, you're better off sticking with either the original story, and I would agree, or, and this is what I really like about this commentary right here, or if you really hate black and white, watch the Peter Cushing film. 7 parts is long, and the abridged version skips out on certain relevant scenes. Like I said, the Susan writing, the Daleks, or the Thals, and whatever. And so I like that because you can have it. You can watch the Peter Cushing Doctor Who and the Daleks. Now, here's an interesting thing revolving around this. So on the timescales, this colorization of the Daleks is currently rated at a 6.1 by the people who have rated it. The Doctor Who and the Daleks, the Peter Cushing story, is rated at a 6.3, so slightly higher than this animation, or not this animation, this colorization. The classic TV series, as rated by the fans on the timescales, is at a 7.8. So again, the classic story by fans who are legitimate fans of the show, who, you know, can accept the old 60s, 70s style of storytelling, love it more than what this is. Now, it would be really interesting to find like a Gen Zer and figure out what they liked about this or what they didn't like about this. But I was watching part of this with my wife, and I had to explain so much because I knew all the context to all the scenes that were cut. She was in the dark. And yeah. So somebody said, you know, looking forward to future colorizations like the War Games. And they said, I hope it is some of the stuff is dialed back, though, and it is properly abridged. That is one 10-part story that is only should only be 7. So I dread how much stuff that they might skip and is missing and left on the editing table, which would be a really interesting thing to figure out eventually. Yeah, so that is my thoughts. If I were to rate the colorization of the Daleks, which was released on the 23rd of November, 2023, so the 60th anniversary, I would probably rate this a 4.5. I would rather watch the slow 7-part, 25-minute per episode story over this 75-minute chunk because there's so much that's missing. Do I appreciate what they tried to do? Absolutely. Do I think they did a good job of it? Again, there are some positives, there are some negatives. Do I like this better than the Power of the Daleks first round animation? No. Even though I hate the first go round of Power of the Daleks animation, I do feel as though the story was not meddled with. The animation was just done lazily and sloppily and also probably hurriedly. But the story has been altered. And I don't know if I can give it I don't think I could ever give it my, seal of approval. My Rassilon Seal of Approval. Ooh, that should be what we should do for that'd be great. Could come up with a sounder or whatever for the Big Finish Review podcast, and each one of us, me, Liam, and Legion, could give our Rassilon Seal of Approval. I like that. I hope I don't forget that by the next time we do our next podcast. Anyway, that being said, what are your thoughts on the colorization of the Daleks? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Email the show at alhambraaudio@gmail.com. That is ALHAMBRA audio, all one word, at gmail.com. Tweet the show at Alhambra Podcast. DMs are open. And until next time, we will see you in time. You have been listening to the Doctor Who Alhambra Podcast. Doctor Who is owned and trademarked by the BBC. Doctor Who Alhambra is not affiliated with the BBC or Big Finish. No infringement is intended. Visit our website at alhambrapodcast.weebly.com or email the show at alhambraaudio@gmail.com. Tweet us at Alhambra Podcast. That is ALHAMBRA Podcast. Thank you.
1, 2, 2.